I was about 10 years old. I remember I didn't much think I'd ever amount to anything. Never thought that far ahead to who I'd become. My daddy was Swedish, my mother German. I grew up speaking English, but my daddy was a violent man, drank a lot, and never really would allow my mother to speak her native tongue. We was poor. I spent most days gathering eggs and other chores around the small farm we had. Sometimes, if I was real lucky and my daddy weren't 3 sheets to the wind, I got to go to school. The sound of my mother's muffled cries were as common as the dust in the Kansas wind. I'd go out to the barn and curl up in the corner sometimes with Morris, my pet goat. I'd sit there and we'd go on grand adventures, him and I, just waiting for the hollering and the crying to stop. But in a single day, everything changed. It was an ordinary day for all practical purposes. I'd gotten to go to school that day, so I was happy. Skipped my way home. As I got to the door, I smelled the scent of a home-cooked meal. A very unfamiliar smell, because, see, we could rarely afford anything more than dried bread, and, well, the unexpected was never a welcome sign. But that hunger in my belly spoke louder at just that moment. As I walked into that dining room, my mother sat at that table, stoic, eyes red and swollen. The entire meal was eaten in silence until it was broken by the words of my drunken father. "How'd you like that goat meat, girl?" The next moments happened in flashes. The sound of the chair violently being shoved back as my mother rose, grabbed the shotgun from the mantel, pulled back the hammer, obliterating the face of the man I'd grown to hate. I remember the smell of gunpowder, the sound of my mother's knees as she dropped to the floor and laid the shotgun down beside her. Because of my mother's reputation as a kind woman had preceded her, every effort was made to spare her the gallows. And one dark, cold February morning, my mother was whisked away, never to be seen again. Rumor had it was a mental home she was being sent to. It was the only way to spare her life, they said. In the end, it made no difference to me because I never saw my mother again. I was taken in by a foster home run by the local Catholic church where I refused to answer to the surname of Anderson. Even at 10 years old, I knew I never wanted a single thing to do with the name of the man I knew was my father. I took my mother's surname, Holtzclaw, instead, much to the frustration of the old nun who ran that place. Day in, day out, Sister Perpetua spent her waking hours trying to mold me into a proper Catholic young lady. I didn't want nothing to do with it. I circumvented her efforts at every turn. This, of course, meant that I spent a lot of time being disciplined. It didn't take long for me to run, heading straight to the local train station where I spent the next 6 years of my life riding the boxcars in search of my mother. Eventually, I got older. Riding them rails took its toll, and I hopped off that train for the last time. I discovered that digging through trash piles behind the local docks office often paid off with at least some decent scraps for a meal, and it was here I'd return when I could no longer ignore the hunger. But one snowy morning, I fell ill. The last thing I remember was huddling up in the pile of garbage, just trying to stay warm. Brief moments of being carried. Kind words whispered and warm blankets. In these moments, I dreamed of my mother. I dreamed of everything that could have been, should have been. That doctor took care of me, raised me as his own, and taught me everything I know about medicine. Now, looking back at who I was, well, it's hard to reconcile that image with the image of the woman I see staring back at me from the mirror. If I can stop one heart from breaking, I shall not live in vain. If I can ease one life the aching, or cool one pain, or help one fainting robin unto his nest again, I shall not live in vain.